And yes, tomorrow is this weekend is the 11th anniversary of Rick and I getting together to do music at Center for Spiritual Living in Cape Coral, going to a 4th of July party, and he asked me to be his prayer partner. We did our first Sunday as co-musicians on what would be the 11 years ago today, and then went on a picnic, a beach picnic. That was our first date, which would be tomorrow. So far, so good. Okay, so I'm going to take a sip of my tea, and we are going to talk some more about freedom. So first of all, I wanted to, of course, just check in with this basic theme for the month. Excuse me. And that is, again, in alignment with Science of Mind magazine. The theme is unchained spirituality, getting free. So the whole month of July is about unchained spirituality, which we believe the Science of Mind and Spirit is all about, as is New Thought, as is metaphysics. Whatever approach that you have, this genre of thought and put into practice is unchained spirituality and getting free. So throughout the month, we're going to be talking about different topics related to one or both of those. And this morning, our talk is called Liberty for All, the Law of Freedom. And the law of freedom is really the very basic foundational introduction to this whole teaching. If you've picked up a Science of Mind textbook, you know that by the time you get to page 25, you're already reading about it. So what I'm going to do is introduce some of the concepts that Ernest Holmes suggests are the basis for the law of freedom and for life itself. And then we're going to talk about what it means for us. So let me just begin with a couple of quotes, and then we're going to go into a little bit of, again, more modern day applications. So I'm going to start with this one, which is a photocopy of a page from the Science of Mind 365. That is a daily meditation book that's obviously 365 entries long. And each month has an introduction page in it. And this one is quotes about freedom. And this one is from Ernest Holmes. He says, "We have thought that outside things controlled us, when all the time we have had that within that could have changed everything and given us freedom from bondage." I don't know about you, but one of the things that I've learned about myself over the years is that when I discover that I had something within me or around me all along that I coulda, woulda, shoulda used earlier, I tend to go right to some, not Franciscan, but some kind of self-flagellation, like, why didn't you think of that sooner? Why didn't you know that sooner? Why didn't you do that sooner? And that's so silly, because nature doesn't do that. Actually, everyone and everything grows and evolves at its own pace. So we can celebrate when we awaken to something that frees us up, rather than saying, why didn't I know that already? Why didn't I do that sooner? So we'll begin with that, and then I want to share something else from Ernest Holmes, which is from page 25 of the textbook. He says that to suppose that the creative intelligence of the universe would create man in bondage and leave him bound would be to dishonor the creative power which we call God. To suppose that God could make man as an individual without leaving him to discover himself would be to suppose an impossibility. So part of the law of freedom, because it's got many components, is that because we are created in the image and likeness of the infinite, that aspect of us, that true core of who we are, the I am principle that we are, cannot be anything but that. So it can't be limited. You can't be infinite and finite at the same time. Spirit can't. We do it all the time. We go back and forth between our infinite selves and our finite stuff galore. So one of the premises of the law of freedom says that in order for all of possibility, all good to be available to us, and for us to be free, we need to be given all of it and then let alone to discover it for ourselves. It sounds like something that Dr. Benjamin Spock might have said. I don't know if any of you saw, a while back I posted a picture. I had a meal with Benjamin Spock, Dr. Spock, when I was about 10 or 11 years old. And so the baby doctors and the psychologists and whomever would probably agree that one of the best ways to give someone an opportunity for success in their life is to provide everything that they require and let them make their own discoveries. And Ernest Holmes is saying that that is part of the law of freedom, of our being created. So then we move on, we say, okay, so I'm supposed to, everything already exists. There's an aspect of me, the seed of me, the core of me that is one with God, Spirit, Creator, which is infinite. And so I'm supposed to discover this by myself because why? Well, the idea also is that if we're told everything that we need to know, we won't ever get around to really knowing it. If we're given everything we already need to have, we won't ever get around to discovering it. And there's something about the process of discovering for ourselves that contributes to real knowledge. Another aspect of the law of freedom says that to the degree that we understand something, you've heard me say this so many times, it becomes law in our lives. And that degree of understanding that causes it to be our new reality, our new normal, a law, the way things are for us, is complete understanding. In fact, Ernest Holmes calls it embodiment. So let's say, my first class in something, I'm going to learn the basics and I'm going to be exposed to them. Maybe the alphabet, for example. And then I'm going to learn how to put words together. Then I'm going to learn how to string sentences together. Then I'm going to learn how to write paragraphs. Then I'm going to learn how to write essays. Then the quality of that experience evolves as I get each part of it, as I learn and completely understand each step, and it becomes second nature to me. Every single time we know something so well that it becomes second nature to us, it has become law in our experience. And so the law of freedom says that we can study any aspect of infinite possibility, and to the degree that we understand that, it will become our reality. So there's that freedom. How magnificent. Well, there's another built-in insurance policy, and that is this idea that our minds are one with divine mind. And we may have never heard such a thing until we set foot in one of these classrooms, until we joined one of these groups or these meetings or these classes. But that is another part of the law of freedom. Because if we were, now we are free to do whatever we want, by the way. We can think, feel, say, do, activate the creative process, create results, all we want. But here's where the law of freedom comes in. If we do that without our awareness of the allness of God/good, if we do that like a lone soldier, or doing that silo thinking they talk about in corporate life, or the lone wolf concept, if we do that alone without being informed by divine mind, of which we are actually a part, what happens is we will suffer because the creative process never stops. It never sleeps. So another part of this law of freedom is that, guess what? Whatever you play with, whatever you discover, whatever you experiment with will always have a consequence. The law of cause and effect will always be operating. Ernest Holmes says that our freedom lies in our understanding and our use of nature's laws. So what happens when we just go on, as he would say, willy-nilly, without seeking clarity, without conscious thought, without conscious choice that's informed by self-awareness and contemplation? If we don't do that, we make messes. And as you can well imagine, we've done that quite a bit, and there are quite a few messes around us, individually and collectively. On the other hand, when we tap into the realization that we are one with infinite intelligence, that we are made by it, out of it, in its image and likeness, then we begin to grasp that there is a place from which our path of right action, as we're going to talk about in a few weeks, our right direction, our good choices, our answers, our solutions all come. That is this revolutionary idea that the mind that I have and that you have is one with the mind which creates all. And so in the middle of all of this stuff that's going on, we know that we can retreat into the silence, into that stillness, into that gap, into that place of contemplation, and we find clarity. We find peace. We find our answers. We find our solutions. And because we are free, we get to choose it. Because we are free, our answers, our solutions cannot be forced upon us. So you see, there's something sort of building here, that we have this overarching infinite intelligence. We have this idea that we're created in its image and likeness. We have this Christian teaching which says that the gifts of the kingdom are within us, that heaven is right here at hand. And some people will object and say, yeah, but look at all this stuff going on. Why do we suffer so? We suffer because we do not know that this is how life operates. And so instead, what do? Last week we were talking about worry and anxiety. We can just try harder and we still have the same experience. And yet, to the degree that we understand that life comes forth from the infinite into the finite, taking form and having experience by means of each of us, we can say, wait a minute, perhaps I will use my self-awareness, my power of choice, the power of my attention and my word, and I will learn how life unfolds, and I will cooperate with it, and therefore cooperate with the unfoldment, the manifestation, the experience of new and more wonderful things. It is counterintuitive, and yet it's not. We were really built to know this, to recognize truth. We call it conscience in our everyday lives. So yes, everything is possible, and we are free. And so in order for us to really get those gifts, we must discover them for ourselves. Because in so doing, we will really, really know this. And really knowing it is what it takes for that thing to become a reality. This is happening on a micro scale every moment of every day, and on a macro scale in the evolution of humanity. So there's another thing that Ernest Holmes says, and I think that rather than finding the exact quote in all of my papers over here, I'm just going to say, around page 107 in the textbook and in the ensuing pages, there are a few of them. He says that mankind has learned all it needs to from suffering. And I think we would agree. So how can we make use of these nature's laws, the way that things operate, to make more of what is possible and good right there waiting for us, our experiences? How can we help to usher that in for our neighbors and our friends. It's a different way to make a difference in this world. It's a different method than fighting. And yet, every single person who has awakened to this to any degree has realized that they can stop in the midst of seeming bondage and suffering and make use of natural laws and spiritual laws and mental laws and begin to seed and soon harvest a different experience.